Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program, and I am your host, Chris Angle. Along with me is my co-host, Rick Samuelson. Rick, how you doing today?
Very well, sir.
The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to examine the nature of concepts being used in current media and compare the essence of the concept with the usage and circumstances in which the term is being used. Also, I'm the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is The Philosophical Equations of Economics, and they're free for viewing at www.philosophypublishing.com. This week, we're going to discuss a picture in the media of the German and Egyptian beach volleyball team. Let's take a look at the picture so we have the subject matter at hand. And obviously there's a stark contrast between the attire of the German team and the Egyptian team. Okay, so why such a dichotomy in costume between the two? I think that should be a discussion because it's significant in the contrast between the two cultures, and an examination would be meaningful. And a possible interpretation of these pictures is that there is a vast difference between a secular society versus an Islamic society, which is theocratic in nature. And you can extrapolate that out to become an argument between freedom and the restrictions placed on by a theocratic society in the observances of its religion. And this picture tells us that there is these restrictions. Obviously, the German team are wearing bikinis, and why do they do that? They're quite revealing, whereas the Egyptian team is not such a revealing costume. And why is that? It's because girls naturally want to be attractive, and that's no surprise. Everybody knows that. The females need to attract themselves. I mean, if we take a look at biological anthropological theory, we can confirm that females have a need to attract, and why is that? Is because they've got to give the impetus to the male to come across the dance floor to select a possible mate, and without that stimuli, the males don't travel. So nature instructs the males to make this, nature instructs the females to make themselves attractive, to draw the male across the dance floor. And so they do that with nice dress and hairdos and provocative attire, and I think this goes into the provocative attire category. And females also have comely facial expressions, and anyway, they make themselves pretty attractive. And on the beach, which is a natural thing in a bathing suit because you've got to go into the water, the nature instructs them, gives them a chance to become very provocative there, because society allows them for a diminished dress occasion, and this is so this is significant because it's among the West's natural rights that are God-given. This ability for the female to dress as she will in whatever situation she finds herself. This freedom is in the Western culture derives itself in natural rights. And so what is where do these natural rights come from? And they're God-given, and the West believes that we are born with them, and that they cannot be taken away, and thus they are natural. And this natural, God-given Western right is the right to be free. And so we really should ask, what is a natural right? And actually, what is a right in itself? And right is, I'm going to offer a definition here. A right is the receiving component of a contract, an agreement, a covenant, and it's the opposite of an obligation, which is the giving component of the contract, and the right is the receiving component. So an agreement consists, inside of it, it consists of at least one right and one obligation. And so, and I think we can take an example of that. If you go down to the local store and you put across at the cash register a $1.50, you've done your obligation, because you gave across your that component of a contract in which you're going to receive whatever it is, like a pack of gum or something. You've got, therefore, once you put that money across, you've fulfilled your obligation, and thus you have a right to receive the product. And so all natural rights are within the covenant with God, and in Western biblical culture, as Locke and his disciple Jefferson have said, that we have a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And this is the basis, the cornerstone of Western culture. And so with that, we have the right to life, liberty, and happiness. So what is our obligation? Well, our obligation is to be thankful to the Lord. And so therefore the covenant is set up. We have a right to receive, our right to life and liberty and pursuit of happiness, but we have the obligation to be thankful to the Lord. And this leads us to a belief in freedom of the individual on a secular basis. In Islamic society, we don't have this freedom, because all is for Allah. And so let's take a little peek at one of the surahs that might be an example of this. And we find in the Quran, in Surah 8, verse 39, "And fight with them until there is no more fitna," which is disorder or unbelief, "and religion should be only for Allah." And because all is for Allah, the theocratic society of the Muslims feel that the basic agreement is different from how we look at it in the West. Thus, they add the theocratic restrictions that the Quran and the Hadith are loaded with, and they sum it up in Sharia law, and thus there are a lot of restrictions that are placed on the inhabitants of those who are in the Islamic societies in the Middle East, and really throughout the world. So their rights remain with God first, and none flow to the individual. Thus the Koranic restrictions, which are obligations, on the volleyball players of Egypt are restrictive enough so that they can't wear what they want. They don't have that freedom. The covenant here is that the individual has an obligation to obey the Quran and the individual then has the right to be placed in paradise. So there's the basic covenant in Islam, which makes it very different from Western society. The right, you have an obligation to observe Sharia law, which comes from the Quran and the Surah, the surahs in the Quran, and also the Hadith. And for that, you get a place in paradise. So Islamic society, there is little secular freedom, but many Koranic restrictions. And the only natural right is a place in paradise, but only if you are a believer and a follower of the Quranic verses. So it's very different, and thus the two societies produce a very different outlook, with that basic contract being so different. And it leads us to not only to such a different view of the world, it brings out every situation, right down to volleyball, and into the tremendous situation developing in Europe right now. It's dividing Europe, and I don't see that the two cultures can assimilate. Rick, what do you think? Can the two cultures assimilate in your opinion?
Well, I think you know my views on the Islamic immigration into Europe. It's causing ever more problems, whether it's terrorism, structural poverty, increased unemployment that's already extremely high. So that's almost a topic unto itself as far as it affects the welfare of all the residents of Europe. As far as Islamic style dress is concerned, I'm not, I lean libertarian on that. I'm not too fussed about what they wear. It must obviously be uncomfortable to be all suited up on the beach in the hot weather, but that's their choice. I'm not of the view, as for example the French have been until quite recently, that this sort of dress shouldn't be allowed in French society, and there are regulations pertaining to that and so forth. I do think that where I come down very, very hard is not accommodating Sharia law under any circumstances. The law is the law. It pertains to all citizens of a given society. If you start separating out different types of law from different circumstances and different groups of people, you're on a very slippery road where abuse inevitably occurs and resentment builds. No one wants to be treated differently than their neighbor under the law. Certainly not in any Western civilization I know. So I know there have been attempts in the UK and elsewhere to impose Sharia law in certain locations, and that has proceeded. I can't imagine it will ever have a sustainable or happy outcome. And resentment from the existing local population of non-Muslims will only increase. And you're right to point out that the backlash in Europe is now running across many countries and growing day by day.
You know, you've stated that the equal application of the law is paramount to the Western mind of thinking, and I agree. So, without the equal application of law, you're going to run into a huge, really a clash with Sharia, which is from the direct word of God, according to Muhammad, and the angel Gabriel. So there is a clash that would naturally occur when these two laws or two beliefs come up against each other. Do you think that they can be do you think that they can assimilate within the Western culture? We've seen that so far it's causing tremendous distress. And I don't think that it can come within, that assimilation cannot happen because of the very basic tenets of the two contracts from the two societies. But practically speaking, do you think that the Muslims that are being that emigrate to Western Europe will eventually assimilate into Western culture, or would Western culture have to assimilate and bend and create a separate set of laws for the followers of Islam?
I think that drama is being played out as we speak. I mean, there are political leaders like Wilders in the Netherlands who claim that basically European civilization as we know it is disappearing. That may be a bit alarmist. What's clear is a central part of the Islamic strategy is to overwhelm Europe with numbers, right? And it's not as if that's some sort of centrally controlled and centrally administered directive coming out of one or another Islamic capital, but rather it's a combination of people looking for, in some cases, a better life, in some cases, free handouts, in some cases, an opportunity to conduct terror. There's many reasons as there are refugees for this mass migration into Europe that's been going on for years, right? And I think there is the possibility of there being a tipping point. Maybe France is closest to that right now, where at some level, when you have, let's say, more Islamic citizens in all the major French cities than traditional French citizens, I suspect on a voting basis, an accommodation with Sharia law could happen, or a domination by Sharia law. I mean, this is not inconceivable. Numbers matter.
Right. Right. They could be voted. Western civilization could just be voted out of office.
Right.
And so, should Western societies continue to import or allow the immigration of people of the Islamic societies of Middle East?
Well, there are several responses to this. At an economic level, what has happened in Europe is absolutely immoral. To take in these people who don't speak the local languages, who have few, if any, skills, when conditions of unemployment across Europe remain no better than they were in the depths of the financial crisis, and in certain countries, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, unemployment is in the high double digits, and youth unemployment is depression level. It's in most of those countries in excess of 20%. So this is the kind of level we experienced in the U.S. during the Great Depression. So the argument that Europe needs these workers is absolutely fallacious and a lot of nonsense. Now, the liberal argument, above and beyond that, since they don't pay much attention to those details, is that diversity in all its forms is the greatest good. Okay, And whatever can be done to achieve quote unquote diversity must be done. It's an imperative. And that seems to stem from some notion, vague notion of white guilt that has to be addressed in, earlier ages of colonial domination that led to the enslavement of certain peoples in Africa and elsewhere in the world, and therefore somehow these traditional European countries should continue to pay and atone for their sins. There's some sort of vague notion that atoning for your sins and embracing diversity, you see it in Sweden, you see it in Germany, is a noble goal to be sought after by the European Union writ broadly. And quite frankly, that battle is going to lose. They're going to lose because the economics of it don't work. People see in Germany, for example, that the German government's spending close to 3 billion euros hiring teachers to teach these immigrants German. So, where does that money come from, right? That's coming straight out of the hides of existing German citizens. And will likely have very little success, right? It'll take years for these Islamic adults to learn German. German is an extremely difficult language. And it'll take years before they'll be anything other than, day laborers, able to contribute anything to the German economy. And the same holds true in all of the other European economies, which, outside of Eastern Europe, perhaps, are all advanced. So I think the diversity argument, you hear it in the United States as well, that somehow we become a stronger society by being more diverse. I think it's nonsense. There's no evidence for it. The United States takes in awards 1 million work visas a year to immigrants, but the economy is growing at 1.2% last quarter. I mean, where's the evidence that they are adding much to economic growth? Where's the evidence that they create more businesses? There have been more businesses that have folded every year than had been created in the United States for the last several years. And where's the evidence for all of it? There isn't any.
Right. Okay. Point well taken. And Rick, I want to thank you for participating, and we'll see everybody next week on the Philosophical Angle.
Thank you.